Hello, film fans. Welcome to All the Film Things. I'm your host, Elizabeth. Thank you for listening. If you're enjoying this podcast, leave a review or a rating. Also, check out the All the Film Things Instagram for updates and more film things. Today, we are talking about the collaborations between Denis Villeneuve and Jake Gyllenhaal, more specifically, the 2013 films Prisoners and Enemy. Joining me is director and first AC, Manny Plaza Fernandez. Thank you so much for joining me today, Manny.
Hi, Elizabeth. How are you doing today?
I'm good. How about you?
Good. I'm excited to be here.
I'm very happy to have you. And we've been talking about this for months now because we met last November on the set of the upcoming short film Time Will Tell. For that project, you were the first AC and I was a PA. We struck up a conversation about film and then my podcast, which led to us figuring out what topic we should do so you can come on. And finally, we're recording this, so I'm thrilled to finally record this episode with you. It's a great topic.
Yeah, no, I'm very excited. I'm glad we got to narrow it down and are finally here doing this. It was also nice to be able to rewatch the two movies we'll be talking about, because I hadn't seen them in a while, and they're just great movies in general. So it was a nice opportunity to get to redo that.
Yeah, both films are incredibly different, and they're both excellent. It's
you're the
same year. They're both released the same year.
Yes, Enemy and Prisoners on the same year. That is honestly incredible to think of, just the amount of work that was put in to just release those two great movies. And I know when we were planning this entire thing, you hadn't seen the movies. So what do you think now that you've seen them?
Well, I had seen Enemy a long time ago. Okay. And I really loved it. My reaction, I will never forget that reaction after finishing Enemy with that last shot, because I had jumped up. Yeah, the spiders. I exclaimed out loud. It was that bad.
I know, I'm with you. I remember watching the movie for the first time and I genuinely got jump scared with that very last shot.
Oh my gosh. It's such a confusing film, and the spiders just completely threw me off. Was this your second time watching Enemy, or have you seen it many times before this?
No, so I believe this was my third time. I had seen it a long time ago, and then I rewatched it at some point, and this was kind of a rewatch coming into it with a fresh mind and kind of knowing Denis Villeneuve's style a little bit more. And honestly, I really think I was able to watch it yesterday, and I came into it now that I finished Enemy with a whole different kind of perspective. I think my perspective on Enemy when I had seen it the first time was that it also kind of confused me. It certainly wasn't my favorite Denis Villeneuve film, and I love Jake Gyllenhaal's acting in it in general. That was no fault in the movie at all, but I think the movie has a lot of symbolism and a lot of metaphorical just visuals that certainly confused me. But coming into it this time, I really appreciated it a lot more.
And you really loved Prisoners. You had said that there's a clear difference for you, that Prisoners you really loved.
Yeah, Prisoners is by far, and I think this is one of my, and this is hard as a filmmaker in general, as somebody who loves movies, but I do think I put Prisoners as one of my top movies in general. I love the movie. I think it's one of my favorite movies. It's incredibly well made. It's incredibly well shot with Roger Deakins, the cinematographer. And just the acting, and it's just star-studded. Everybody gives a great performance, and the story unravels in such an interesting way. It's also just a very emotionally intense movie, which I think I like when movies are able to do that. I think that's the whole point of movies, and I like when they're able to do that.
Wow, I didn't know you hold it in that high regard. It's one of your very favorites. That's amazing.
Yes. I think it's just very, very good writing and storytelling in every way that I think filmmaking kind of does. It just kind of collides with acting and directing and cinematography and lighting, and it's just very, very well made. It's also a simple story. There's nothing crazy going on in terms of action and blockbuster kind of events. It's just a very simple, emotional story about a family going through this grieving process of their kids being missing and trying to find out what happened.
Yeah, and it's a really tough watch. Intense is a perfect way to describe it.
Yes. What did you think? You had seen Enemy, you had not seen Prisoners. So what did you think of Prisoners?
Yes, I just watched Prisoners, I think, a week or two ago, and I had been avoiding it. I love Jake Gyllenhaal. He's one of my favorites, same with you, and it was one of the biggest films of his filmography that I hadn't seen, And I once had it recorded on TV, but then I backed out and deleted it because I didn't think I could handle it. So This episode was like it confronted a fear, and I was fine most of the time until when Holly, was pointing the gun at him. That's when I started to really kind of get really nervous and freak out.
Yeah. It's a very, very emotionally intense movie. And I think the movie just takes you on such an emotional roller coaster and attaches you to like what's happening so well.
Mm-hmm.
That, yeah, I can't blame you. Even watching it very recently as well for the episode, I've seen it a bunch of times and it doesn't lose like the intensity for me, even though I know like exactly what's about to happen and stuff.
How many times have you seen it?
I remember, I mean, at this point, I've probably seen it about five or six times.
Oh, you've put yourself through it time and time again.
Yeah. I mean, it's definitely not, it's one of those movies that you definitely have to be like in the mood to watch it.
Mm-hmm.
If you're having a good day, I don't think it's the movie to put on.
Yeah.
But I do think it's such a great movie. And I mean, the movie's 2.5 hours long, and I think you don't feel it, at least in my opinion. I think the movie's just paced so well that the 2.5 hours kind of fly.
Yeah, it really does. And Enemy is an hour and a half, so it's a complete. It's 1 hour longer, but one's more concrete, one's more of an art film. So,
yeah.
Is Prisoners your favorite Denis film?
It certainly was until Dune Part 2.
Oh, wow.
Yeah. Dune Part 2 is but we certainly won't get into that in the episode. But I certainly think that's my favorite Denis movie.
Okay.
Prisoners, I would probably put at second place in that list, though.
Wow. Okay. Since you rewatched Enemy the other day, has it gone higher up on your list of Denis films?
So, I've seen all of Denis movies except for, I think, one of his first movies called Incendies.
Mm-hmm.
I haven't seen that one. And I guess there's another movie he made called Polytechnique in 2009, which I have also not seen.
Mm-hmm.
But out of all the other movies, Dune Part 1, Dune Part 2, Blade Runner 2049, Arrival, I think is absolutely incredible. Sicario, Prisoners, and Enemy, I think are all wonderful, wonderful movies from Denis' filmography.
Yeah, it's a hard ranking. It's a very hard ranking.
100%. Yes, I agree with that. Enemy would definitely go, just to answer your question about where I would put Enemy on the list, I certainly think it would be higher than, it's tough. It's definitely higher on the list. I think I would probably put it over Sicario. I think Sicario is a little bit of a slower movie for me.
Mm-hmm.
So maybe it beats Sicario out on the list, but everything else is just so wonderful. Arrival is incredible, and I think all of his movies just have such just do filmmaking very well. And I think Jake Gyllenhaal is, a tool to the filmmaking process of like kind of collaborating to make these stories. Because with Denis' filmography, everything is so layered and everything has so much like meaning visually and with the aesthetic that he puts into the film. So it's not just what he's showing you, is literally the image, but a lot of times what he's showing you has symbolism to, the overall theme of the movie, which I think, is something that I think is lost in modern filmmaking.
Yeah, absolutely. I think Denis is a master of technique. Just from watching these two back to back, the way he uses lighting, the way he uses silence, the way he uses writing, imagery, symbolism, as you said, he's a true master.
Yes, yeah, I certainly agree. Especially after watching Enemy, I think, now that I kind of understood it, and I'm interested to also hear your take, just because I think Enemy is certainly one of those movies that has so much interpretation behind it, where you can't really be wrong with how you interpret it.
Mm-hmm.
But I love the way that, certain scenes in Enemy, for example, like, I don't know if you recall, there's a scene where Anthony is seeing Adam come out of like the apartment with his like mistress, Mel.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
And she gives him a kiss, and then he gets in the car, and then she walks towards the bus, and he's kind of like stalking her on the motorcycle.
Mm-hmm.
That scene is played out in a very interesting way, because then he gets on the bus with her, and he's kind of stalking her and looking at her in a way where it's almost like all of the things we're seeing and all the interactions that they're having together are actually happening in Adam's head, which is what I think. I think a lot of the interactions are really is a subconscious thing that's happening in his head. So when he gets into the bus and he is looking at the mistress this way, I think it's in his head. Is he's imagining that this person that he's been stalking is his mistress. And that kind of connects with the car accident scene at the very end, where he, I think once again, like, has this conflict where in his head he's imagining like how it would go if he was that person, in comparison to then the decision I think he makes at the end with confronting, like, you know, his wife and kind of wanting to make amends, but then getting the key. And so it kind of leaves it very open-ended as to, you know, what decision he's going to make.
Yes, it's a very open-ended, and I was going to ask you about the narrative of it and the timeline. And okay, I'm going to ask you about Jake Gyllenhaal for a moment, and then we're going to get into Enemy, because Enemy is, you're right, there's so many interpretations, and it's such a confusing film. I don't feel like I'm fully, I've tried my best. I've done so much research, and I still am confused. It's not clicking. It's getting better.
I'm with you. It's certainly one of those movies, and I think even with this conversation, like, I would implore maybe give it a few months and then maybe watch it at some point again, and maybe like you'll come into it with a new perspective. Because I do think it's a very like interpretive movie, and there's no like right answer, but there's a lot of things that I really, really like just in the way that the storytelling happens, and in the way that I think Denis, and with that Jake Gyllenhaal's acting, kind of allows the viewer to like piece the movie together rather than like the movie giving you everything. It kind of just gives you little hints and gives you little things to make your own decision, which I really, really appreciate.
Yes. And from the research I've done, so many people have various takes, which adds to the confusion when trying to find a concrete answer, like I try and do with Nolan films. So.
Right. And I think that there's a pretty stark difference with Nolan films, even though they are pretty similar in terms of like the overall theme that they try to follow. And they're both absolute masters at that. But I think Nolan is a little bit more direct with his storytelling. Even I think a movie like Memento or Inception, I think, are pretty like on theme most of the time with the narrative. Where I think that Denis movies, at least with Enemy, I think there's a little bit more like a creative freedom with that.
Yeah, they're definitely two masters, and they're two of the best of our time. And with Enemy, I don't think, going back to kind of what you were saying, I don't know if we're going to find an answer, no matter how many times we watch it.
Correct. Yeah, I agree.
Now, about Jake Gyllenhaal, if I remember correctly, did you say that Jake Gyllenhaal is your favorite actor?
Yeah, I certainly think you do remember correctly. Good memory.
Oh, thank you.
I think Jake Gyllenhaal is definitely one of my favorite actors. I think if I kind of always think back on performances I've liked and just the way that acting has kind of had an impact on me, I think Jake Gyllenhaal has always stood out for me. So yeah, I think I'd consider him one of my favorite actors.
Do you remember when and how you became a fan of his?
That's a good question, actually. And there was a moment in my life where I've always been into movies just because I kind of grew up. My family's been into movies, but there was a moment in my life, I think in high school, when I started to get like really, really into movies, and especially into college when I made the decision to like study film and stuff. I was kind of getting into watching more movies, and I had made like a list of movies that I hadn't seen, and in one of the lists was Donnie Darko, which I'm not sure if you've seen Donnie Darko.
Oh yeah.
And that was I think it was his first film, Jake Gyllenhaal's first film, or one of his first films.
Well, I think City Slickers was his first when he was Billy Crystal's son, but that was his first like major role, I'd say.
Right, like a leading man, I believe. That was
well, October Sky, I think 98.
Was that before?
Yeah, that was. Yeah, he was definitely younger in October Sky. I know that was late 90s.
Okay, perfect. So, but certainly, I think it was like the time when Jake Gyllenhaal was kind of like breaking out,
yes,
and making a lot of movies. But Donnie Darko, I hadn't seen it. I really, really liked that movie, and it was kind of the same idea of just seeing like somebody with a decent amount of range. And then I think I watched Nightcrawler, which I really, really loved his performance in Nightcrawler. I think that was I think I kind of got the chance to see what his range was
Yes.
And then I think after Nightcrawler, I just got interested in seeing more of Jake Gyllenhaal. So I watched Southpaw.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know if you've seen Southpaw. That's a very good one.
It's a great one.
Stronger as well,
yeah.
which is like almost like a biopic.
Mm-hmm.
So I just liked his range. I like the types of movies he's made. Even the movies that are kind of silly and he plays kind of eccentric characters like Okja and stuff like that. I really like. I just think he's an actor with like presence, and I think he's great. I think even in character, I think even when he does more kind of mainstream and like quote unquote regular characters, I still think he does a good job. Like he played Mysterio in the Spider-Man movie, and I thought that was good. He does a good job. He does what he needs to do.
Yeah.
And when it comes to movies like Enemy and Prisoners, I think he adds a certain layer to the storytelling and to the character work that I think is very particular to him.
It's funny you mentioned Mysterio because I was watching that movie. I think it's No Way Home. I know it's the second one. I just forget the titles.
Far From Home.
Far From Home. Yes, that one.
Yeah.
And I'm waiting for something to happen because it was just becoming such an easy role for him. And then when the twist happened, I was like, okay, here we go. Now this is why Jake Gyllenhaal is doing this.
Right, exactly. Like just seeing a little bit more of the range and a little bit more of like the role rather than him just being like a regular superhero in that role at the beginning.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, I certainly agree with that. And I think he just does a good job of, I don't know if you've seen like End of Watch as well.
There is a scene in that I guess there's something that happens with like an eye stabbing scene that I just can't watch, so I haven't seen that one.
Okay, I honestly haven't seen End of Watch in a while, but I remember liking it a lot because the character work between him and Michael Pena, they're literally cops, and they're like a buddy cop movie, and it's like shot in a very like District 9 kind of documentary style. It's a very, very good film. I just think he does just such good character work, and he prepares very well. And his characters never feel like he couldn't possibly be that person,
Mm-hmm.
So yeah, and I think in regards to him in Enemy, I think he does an incredible job. And I know you meant to kind of segue into a little bit of the narrative with that, and I think that it's interesting with him playing essentially two characters, but they're really just one character because it's really just Adam. So I like that kind of complexity he adds to the film with Denis directing, because he kind of makes it so that because the acting is the way it is, the movie is confusing. The movie is interpretive, so you never really know what is happening and who's who. And the movie gives you such small hints as to what is happening and what you're looking at that moment, that I think Jake Gyllenhaal does a really, really good job with the minute things. Like he'll, just kind of squint his eyes in a certain way or put his head down in a certain way that'll take away all of the confidence from him. When he's Adam, when he's Anthony, he's very, confident and athletic. And it's also like he's playing two different people, but again, in the movie, he is just one guy. So it's interesting. It's really, really interesting. And I think an actor like Jake Gyllenhaal only elevates a script and a film like Enemy, along with Denis directing, because of how he can give characteristics that are very minute, but make a very, very big difference.
Yes. And it's amazing how just between the two characters, as you said, how different they are in Enemy. And then you hop over to Prisoners, he's a completely different character in that as well. Right.
As Detective Loki.
Yes, Detective Loki.
Which I love his character in that. I think it's very complex. I also recently read that apparently a lot of the tattoos and like the eye ticks that he has in that movie were actually like his kind of idea and his interpretation. That wasn't really written into the script, or that wasn't really like Denis directing. It was really just him bringing that interpretation of Detective Loki and kind of he's very neurotic. Detective Loki's a very neurotic character, and so he has he's not a normal guy. His opening scene is we're seeing him eat at some empty Chinese restaurant on a rainy day on Thanksgiving. So he clearly doesn't have a lot of family. He doesn't have a lot of people. He kind of is very focused on his work. And throughout the movie, you see that Detective Loki is very persistent, which is why the closing shot of the movie is is so incredible because the closing shot of the movie doesn't need to tell you that Jake Gyllenhaal is going to eventually find Hugh Jackman under the car. You can come to that conclusion on your own because of the way that Detective Loki's character has been so persistent, the way Jake Gyllenhaal plays him. And I think that intensity with also keeping it maintained within the story, because with Prisoners, Detective Loki is an incredible character, but I don't think that Detective Loki is more or less of a character than Hugh Jackman's character or Viola Davis' character, because just everybody's character in that movie excels. And with Jake Gyllenhaal and Denis, I think they just, and Denis in particular, I think he does such a good job of kind of getting the best out of all of his actors, but maintaining them contained to what he needs. Like in Dune Part 2, of course, and in Dune 1, it's just super star-studded. You have Timothée Chalamet, Zendaya, Jason Momoa, just the biggest stars in the world. Somehow the movies never feel like one actor is overtaking, the screen or the story unless they need to at that time, which I think is just great, filmmaking.
Yeah, he is really great with ensembles and even something so starkly different with Enemy. In an interview I saw, I think Denis had told Jake ahead of making Prisoners that he's not going to be able to give him as much attention as he did with Enemy, which Jake was perfectly fine with. And he made, of course, some joke because he's hilarious and his interviews are always just the funniest.
No, I love it. I love his Hot Ones episode.
Oh my God. Yes. Literally every interview. That's honestly how I became a fan of him first, through interviews. He was just so funny.
Yeah, he's great.
Is either Prisoners or Enemy one of your favorite Jake Gyllenhaal films or performances?
I think, if I had to choose a favorite Jake Gyllenhaal film performance-wise, there's honestly such a variety. As I'm literally scrolling through the filmography here, I just literally watched Life the other day. That was incredible. If I had to pick one right now, I would probably say Nightcrawler.
Yeah.
Because again, I think that was kind of the movie that I got introduced to just the range and character work. I think as a filmmaker and as somebody that likes movies and just storytelling in general, I really like characters. I really like world building. And I think that Denis is a master at world building and Jake Gyllenhaal is a master at character work. And, this is my two favorite things coming together in Enemy and Prisoners. But I think in Nightcrawler, just the character work there with Jake Gyllenhaal individually is spectacular.
It's amazing how he wasn't even nominated for an Oscar for that. Yeah.
I mean, he wasn't nominated for an Oscar for that. I'm still a little upset that Hugh Jackman didn't get nominated for an Oscar for Prisoners. Because his performance, talking about just the ensemble cast and everything, I think Hugh Jackman's performance and what Denis was able to bring out of him was incredible. And I think it is a shame that he wasn't more recognized for the role, because Hugh Jackman's obviously very well known for the big role of Wolverine and was it The Greatest Showman as well and stuff like that. But I think roles like these are roles that he can also excel at, clearly. And it's a shame that he didn't get more recognition.
Yeah. I think the film only earned one Oscar nomination, which is shocking.
Prisoners at the time, yeah. What was it?
I think it was writing. I should have listed that in my notes. I normally list Academy Award stuff, but it's really shocking considering how much it's still talked about today.
It is a shame. And I believe as I'm looking through here, it might have been cinematography, which obviously, it's Roger Deakins.
Sure. So, that makes probably more sense. Roger Deakins behind the camera.
Yeah. So I think that might have been the nomination there. I'm not sure if who got it that year, but it looks like that's what they got nominated for. And it truly is a shame, the more I watch it, that it just didn't get nominated for anything else. At least an acting performance nomination for Hugh Jackman. I think even, not that any character is more or less than the other, but I think even Paul Dano in that movie is
absolutely.
Yeah, Paul Dano is also a character with just so much range, and it's incredible to see movies like Prisoners where you have essentially just masters of their craft excelling in every single position. You have Jake Gyllenhaal, you have Hugh Jackman, Viola Davis, you have again, Roger Deakins behind the camera. You have incredible production designers, Denis, of course, with the directing. And there's just so much about the movie that is absolutely loaded with talent. But it's a shame that, honestly, I talk about Prisoners a lot, and I think most people aren't really familiar.
Really? You think it's become an underrated film?
For the most part, maybe not necessarily underrated. I think it's just a lot of people aren't. It's certainly because I think it is a very intense, emotional film. It's not a film that you can just kind of like throw on a family day you're having.
Yeah.
So I think like it certainly lends itself to not be like a very recommendable movie, to just kind of be casual with it. But I wish that it was regarded better. I guess just for the general public.
Yeah.
I think filmmakers have a pretty good grasp on it being a good film.
Yes. I think that one is talked about a little bit more than Enemy. Enemy seems to have kind of really gone under the radar.
Yeah, I agree. And the more I seem to kind of look into his Enemy, I think Enemy seems to also be, because I think, like you mentioned, it is a very confusing movie. It is very interpretive. It tends to kind of hit a little bit lower on the reviews than some of the other Denis projects.
Mm-hmm. Like Nolan, it's amazing how some brilliant films of theirs, like, it's not like the worst rated film that you rank is a bad film. It's still excellent, but they just have so many other even better films that it's just hard to rank them in general.
No, I agree with that. I think that's exactly kind of the dilemma with Denis and like you mentioned, Christopher Nolan as well. You have such great filmography that you feel bad putting any of them at the bottom of the list.
Mm-hmm.
But in terms of, Enemy, just the way that the film is kind of shot, the way that the narrative is kind of presented, I do understand why it's a little bit lower on the reviews, or maybe just in general, people don't like it in comparison to some of Denis' other projects. I like movies that do this kind of thing where they leave a lot of it up to interpretation. I think it kind of does exactly this, where it allows for a lot of dialogue and allows for a lot of like different ideas. And that kind of thing, it's like if we were looking at a painting and talking about what the painting means, is we would never be right or wrong.
Mm-hmm.
So I like movies like these. I like movies like, not to go too off topic, but movies that also do this are like Annihilation, Alex Garland, are just very like interpretive movies that just do like filmmaking and I think storytelling in a very interesting way, where it has a goal, has a theme, has a direction, but it kind of lets you decide the narrative, which I think is cool.
Yeah, absolutely. Enemy and Prisoners were both released the same year, as we said, and they were both Villeneuve's English language debuts. But Enemy was filmed first, and since that one is, as we've been saying, up to interpretation, it's a confusing film, I want to get through that film first because there's just a lot to unpack in this film.
For sure. I even had like written some notes down while I was watching it, just because I wanted to kind of be prepared for some of the stuff that we'd be talking about, because the movie is very confusing. There's a lot of stuff, and I just wanted to like remember some of the scenes and stuff.
I love that. I'll start by reading the IMDb plot summary for Enemy. A man seeks out his exact lookalike after spotting him in a movie. Okay, that is
is that actually the IMDb thing?
Yes.
That's awesome.
Now I want to read how Denis described the film.
Okay.
He describes the film as a movie about a man who is going back to his family, but the movie is seen from his subconscious point of view. He also says that at the time, this was his most complicated film to make. I'm curious if that's true today. But another way I've heard the film described, maybe Denis said this too, is Enemy is about a man who is having a crisis, and through his crisis, leaves his mistress to fall back in love with his wife. He has to meet himself to learn the truth of himself. So 3 very different descriptions.
Yeah, it is interesting because, again, I think even the director himself is giving an interpretation that is pretty just overall and pretty vague. I think that all 3 of those things you said are right, and I also personally, with my interpretation of it, I think I would maybe disagree with some of it. I think I kind of, obviously Denis directed the movie, so he knows what he's trying to say. I think a lot of what we're seeing in Enemy is actually just a very I think Enemy is about like a sick man. I think Adam has mental issues, And I think he has some sort of trauma that we actually even get to see a little bit of it, not only at the very beginning of the movie. The very beginning of the movie, not the scene where the lady steps on the spider, but directly after that, it opens to a cityscape, and then Adam is sitting in a car while listening to a voicemail of his mom criticizing the apartment that he lives in. And then later on, which is kind of a turning point in the movie, where he's having dinner with his mom and he's like telling her all these things, and then his mom says, "You have a good job, you have a nice girl, you have a nice wife, like you should quit that dream of trying to be some third-rate actor." And that's a turning point in the movie, because I think that's kind of, at least in my opinion, the movie, that's the point where Adam realizes that Anthony isn't some other guy that looks like him. Anthony is him. And I think Anthony is like a subconscious, because is like an alter ego or like an enemy that he made to shield himself from the trauma that he's going through and the thoughts that he's going through. His wife is 6 months pregnant, and he's a college professor that is absolutely miserable. He's trying to be a successful actor. He's trying to live some lavish lifestyle, because as they show in the movie, he hasn't had work for 6 months acting wise. His wife has been pregnant for 6 months, and they don't seem to be having like a very loving, happy relationship. So Adam creates, in my opinion, an alter ego or an enemy, which is just Anthony to protect himself, from these things. And the fantasies that he's having is the fantasy of being with his mistress, Mel. But I truly don't think that him and Mel are actually together.
Gosh, this is a fascinating interpretation you're telling me now.
And I mean, there could be, again, I think there could be like right or wrong, because the movie does a very, very good job of just giving you little things, but then also kind of shifting, because there is a scene where the wife asks, Jake Gyllenhaal if he's seeing her again, and we never get to know who her is. There's an interpretation that could be said that he did have a mistress at some point, or that is the mistress. But again, I think the movie and Jake Gyllenhaal's acting and Denis layering with all of these kind of themes is, in my interpretation of it, as I think that we're seeing just like a mentally ill man. And there's even a point in the movie where it's the point in the movie where Adam like sneaks into Anthony's like expensive apartment to pretend to be him. And then he sees the wife there and like lays on the bed with the wife, and the wife like tells him to take the clothes off, and she like puts her hand on him and stuff like that. That, at least for me visually, what I'm seeing is the wife knows that there's like something wrong with him. She knows that he's sick, and she tries to play along with it, because she lays on his chest and she asks, "How did everything go at school today?" Knowing that he's in this kind of position where like he is Adam right now, he's not Anthony. I think there's, again, the movie is very, we could probably be here talking about it for the entire rest of the episode.
Oh yeah, it's a film that deserves a whole episode, truly.
Yes, no, I certainly agree. And again, I want to like reiterate that anything I'm saying, even though I say it with certainty, I do think all of this is very interpretive. I think it's very, just my opinion, how I'm seeing things. But I just want to make that clear, because this movie is very, I think, divisive in that way, where you could be seeing things and I'm seeing a whole nother movie. I think it's honestly great. It's a great representation of storytelling, how you don't always have to kind of have this very straight narrative. I think you can have very visual storytelling, and the movie does visual storytelling very, very well, especially with kind of like the little details, like I was talking about. I think Denis plays a lot with the idea of showing you Jake Gyllenhaal in a scene, sitting in a car or watching a movie or something like that, and making you think that he's Adam at that point when he's actually Anthony, or vice versa. And for example, he's at the very opening scene of the movie where he's in this club that they go to see these like fetish things. He has his wedding ring on, so he's very clearly like aware, and he's very clearly like in the position of like he's escaping clearly the weight of his life, which is that his wife is pregnant and he has all these responsibilities. He's escaping that by being in this club, and the stepping on the spider, could represent just like that weight crushing down on him. Like that entire thing just coming down to him.
That is a great observation, the wedding ring on his finger. But do you think that scene is at the end? Because I'm thinking, what if this film, and again, like reiterating what you say, I also am very confused. So do not take this as fact, everyone. This is like, I'm trying my best to understand it. And I do need a rewatch again soon because it was far too long since I've last watched it. But I'm curious, what if it's a circular narrative like Arrival, and that scene of that club goes to the end after the scene that shot with the spider when he gets the key?
Yeah, I that is again, that is honestly like a very, very good point. I hadn't thought of that, and that very, very well could be. There's very well like evidence to support that, just in terms of like the timeline of things is never very clear.
Right.
And I think that it's very interesting because the movie, again, throws so many things at you that you kind of have to, if you're watching it for the first time, you're never really going to be able to piece it together the way that I think the narrative kind of wants you to, because it's kind of random things. Like, I don't know if you recall when Adam tries to go to the apartment and he hops into the elevator, and the guy who's letting him into the apartment, like the bellkeep, is talking to him in the elevator about how he got like cut from the list. Do you recall that scene?
Oh yeah, that is a big question mark.
Yeah, so I think that scene again is very interesting because that scene, at least in my opinion, kind of anchors reality, which I think is the reality is that like the club that we're seeing in the beginning of the movie is like a real fetish club, I guess.
Like an Eyes Wide Shut kind of thing?
Yeah. And I think that that's kind of rooted in reality because the bellkeep kind of talks to Adam very casually about it. You know, he talks to him, he's like, there was some list and my name got cut, so I'm not getting the key or whatever. And then Adam kind of pretends, he says, I'll see what I can do. I think that scene is very rooted in reality. And I think at the very end, especially with what you're saying now, with that envelope, you know, he gets that confidential envelope, he opens it up and there's a key. I think that's rooted in reality. I think that reality is that like he has been part of all of these things, and made the perception of like Anthony so that he could separate himself from all of these like, I guess you could say like inappropriate and gross things that he's been doing, going to fetish clubs when he should be with his 6-month pregnant wife. And that's kind of how I see it. That really, really concretes the fact for me that Anthony is really like almost a emotional and mental cover that he subconsciously, like a subconscious alter ego kind of thing, which in my opinion also just attaches to the name of the movie, which is enemy. So he like makes an enemy of himself kind of thing.
So you think definitely that Adam is the one that is the real person and that Anthony is the kind of figment of his imagination, the one that's his more subconscious, I guess. His
fantasy, yes. Yeah. I believe Adam is the real one. I think Adam is like a real, like a professor. He really is a professor. He really is married to his wife. She really is 6 months pregnant. But I think he created this like separate identity so that he could be Adam, and Adam is essentially the one that's winning, while Anthony is the one that's losing, because Anthony is in like this miserable marriage and he hasn't had sex in 6 months and he's not gotten any work and he has all these issues, while Adam Bell is living a nice life with his mistress and doing all of these things. And again, I think that very scene at the end where he gets the key is very representative of like that scene being rooted in reality and everything we've been seeing kind of being up to interpretation whether or not it was in his head,
Yeah. And again, about the key in that conversation in that elevator, the way they talk about it is reminiscent of Fight Club, the way they can't really talk about it.
Yes. And I really, really like that. I also, to say just about Denis' directing style, and I think also the cinematographer for Enemy did a wonderful job with that as well, where I really like the almost awkward angles. Like, for example, in that elevator scene, like we never really see the other over-the-shoulder angle of what the bellkeep is saying. We only see Adam's angle. Like it never cuts away from that. And I think that's a very like awkward kind of thing, but it works perfectly. There's another time when Adam calls, and Anthony answers the phone for the first time and he gets really, really excited. He like goes into the bathroom to talk on the phone and the camera never goes into the bathroom with him. We just kind of see like we're kind of like peering in through the door as the door is like kind of cracked open a little bit.
Mm-hmm.
And it just stays there as we're listening to the entire conversation with that shot. And I think stuff like that is great. Another one of those scenes, for example, is when he tries to go to the talent agency,
Mm-hmm.
and the security officer stops him and he starts telling him like, hey, you haven't been here in 6 months, I haven't seen you, blah blah blah. And that's also a shot that like only stays on Jake Gyllenhaal, this like really awkward side angle for the entire conversation. And the security guard's talking the whole time, but it never cuts to his angle. I love that. I think it's very, very wonderful. And if it's a directing choice, that I think the needs props for that. And if it's a cinematographer choice, then he needs props for that too.
And Jake Gyllenhaal deserves props for it because it's this camera staying on him. We're not really leaving him, especially in that scene that you were just referring to when going to the agency. I mean, the film is mostly all him. And even in those shots, it's still all him. He's the main character. He's the main two characters, kind of.
Yeah. And he really, really does carry. And I think that is a testament to just how much range he has. Like he can go, again, from this very like kind of awkward, nervous Adam character where he's like dressed, kind of sloppily and then all of a sudden he can go to this like very confident, athletic, guy. And then he's like, he's stalking Mel in the bus. He's very like threatening and
mm-hmm.
has legitimate presence as somebody kind of threatening. And, it's wonderful because you're totally correct in saying that he really does kind of carry the whole movie. I mean, the movie is him, and it is honestly a testament to how he was able to kind of make this entire narrative work on his back, especially with it being so kind of up to interpretation. And is he playing two people? Is he playing one people? And I think it's wonderful that an actor can do that to the extent that he did.
Yeah, and. So, as a general rule, if the lighting is yellow-toned, are we seeing Adam? We're in Adam's area of the world. And if the frame is white-toned, we see Anthony's world?
I will be honest, I have not seen the breakdown of that. I haven't really paid attention enough in the movie to know, like, if it's yellow when we're seeing Anthony or white when we're seeing Adam or vice versa. I do think that the lighting is very purposefully kind of harsh and contrasty in that movie.
Mm-hmm.
And I do think the color palette is wonderful because it gives the movie a very like almost a sick feeling. And I think that the whole color palette with the lighting, with the imagery and everything like that, the big spiders on the cityscape and stuff like that, I think it just plays very, very well into the feeling of the entire movie where it's kind of uneasy.
When you think about the bleak cityscape shots and with the increase of fog, I guess you can say, and with that enormous spider on the left side of the frame, like, what do you make of that? Do you have an interpretation for that?
As I was watching the movie, I certainly kind of noticed, at least for my watch, that when the spiders are on the cityscape, at least throughout the movie, it shows you the cityscape and it's kind of empty. It's just the city. And that at one point in the movie, it starts showing this giant spider that's kind of overlooking the cityscape. And at least for me, I noticed that turning point when all of a sudden we're seeing the spider overtaking the city it's after he has dinner with his mom, where he, at least in my opinion, comes to the realization because of what his mom says, stop trying to be some third-rate actor. Not to mention there's so many things, like they have the same scar on their chest and everything like that. But that scene, that turning point, I think kind of sets for me the idea that perhaps the spiders are like the representation of this looming kind of feeling and trauma that he now has to kind of confront. That's my interpretation of it. And again, this movie is very, very up to interpretation, especially regarding that very last scene where, he kind of goes into the room and we see the giant spider kind of cowering against the corner. And it's an interesting just imagery. And the way that that's like a closing shot, I think has a lot to say about what the spiders mean. And I think it's great that Denis hasn't like exposed what the spiders mean or any of the meaning of the movie. And I like that because it really, really leaves it up.
You don't want him to set the story straight on that?
No, I think that's not his job, right? And I don't think that, I just feel like with things like that, the explanation would probably not satisfy, you know? It wouldn't quench like your thirst, whatever like theme he has on it, whatever thing he attached. I think it's such a broad thing in the film, the way that it's presented, that there's bound to be people that even if it comes out of Denis' mouth himself, that they'll be like, no, that's not true.
Right.
So regardless, I think again, it's such an interpretive movie and such interpretive imagery that even the maker of the thing himself wouldn't be able to like explain it properly.
Yeah, and they all signed NDAs apparently, so we're not going to know what that truly means.
Oh, interesting. I didn't know that. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
What's that all about?
I don't know, but this I'd always remembered after watching it for the first time years ago, because right after the film, I start researching what does that mean. And one of the first things I read was they all signed NDAs. They do not have an explanation. So, dead end.
Wow. That's interesting, though. I wonder, if they have a specific reason as to why they did that. You know, they must.
Well, some of them have spoken out on their interpretations, like Melanie Laurent, I believe the actress's name, who played Mary. She felt like the spider represented the mother.
Okay.
That in particular is an interesting take, but I often see it referenced as lust, like lust is the real enemy.
Okay. The movie certainly has it certainly attaches itself very much to this like sexual, like it's very much attached to sex, and I think like very much attached to, I guess, the drive that I guess Adam has in particular through his trauma of wanting this like perfect life with his mistress, because in the beginning of the movie, where they're showing kind of Adam's perspective with this fantasy with his mistress, they're very like sexually active. They're not very loving. They don't really share a lot of time together, but they just have a lot of sex. And I think that there's certainly a representation of that in particular, obviously with like their fetish club, that I think is very important and very prevalent with the movie. But at least in my opinion, the spider representing lust is an interesting take.
Yeah, and you mentioned how active they are. It's all routine. That montage is such a great portrayal of routine and just boredom.
Yeah, exactly. It's just work and then home and then sex and then work and then watching some shitty movie and then work again. And exactly. And I think that because of that, he does start to break and kind of clash with this persona of Anthony. I think as the movie goes on, he's kind of like continuously clashing with this persona and slowly becoming one again.
Definitely. And it's amazing how when the car crash happens, Adam feels it because that's a part of him that's, I guess, dying, maybe?
I think that car accident scene, again, at least for me, it sets the idea that it's not real. But I do like the interpretation that you have where it's like that part of him that is Anthony in that moment dies. Because I think that scene in particular where he's representing like when he's with his wife, it's almost opposite, right? Adam is with his wife, but then Anthony is with the mistress. So in that moment, it's opposite. And I think he's kind of in his mind going over like, what would it be like? Like, what would it have been like? Because that's kind of the turning point, and that's kind of the montage, and that's kind of the scene where he kind of decides that, he's going to continue being with the wife, and that like now he's going to kind of pick up from there. Because he's Adam, he's now feeling bad that he's like, he goes up to the wife, he's like, you're 6 months pregnant. Do you need anything? And while that's happening, in his mind, he's playing the fantasy of what would happen if he was with the mistress. So yeah, I do agree with you. I think that in that regard, it is certainly a part of him that's dying. But I don't think it's real. I don't think that car accident really happened.
So do you think Mary is real?
I think she's real, but I don't think that they are together.
Interesting.
I think that it's a fantasy that he has with her, and I think that the entire thing is him going to these like fetish clubs and like having this other life because he has money to he bought another apartment kind of thing to have this double life. So I don't think that she's real, and especially in particular with that bus scene. It's just the way that Anthony is stalking her and the way that he's responding and everything. It just, that, I think that scene in the bus for me is another scene that's rooted in reality. Like, I really think it is him in that scene really stalking Mel's character, but we think that he's stalking like his mistress, and I don't think he's his mistress at all. She's his mistress at all.
Gosh, you have such interesting takes on this film. I love it.
Yeah. It is a very interesting movie. It's very,
It really is.
The crazy things that I'm saying make at least some semblance of sense.
Oh yeah, they do. And I've heard such different interpretations of the film. I've heard most of them actually say that Anthony is the real guy and Adam is the subconscious. But there was one...
Oh, okay.
Yeah, isn't that strange? I also saw one that agreed more with you, that it's Adam at the end, and I was more inclined to agree with that too. So, I mean, all the research, it helps in a way, but gosh, it's still like just dead end.
It just confuses you on the other end. It just makes it harder. Yeah.
Yes, it just confuses you even more. It's kind of like Joker too. It's like you're not going to figure it out. Like, I can figure out Inception, I can figure out Tenet. I can't figure out these.
Yeah. These are very much, I think, much more symbolic, and I think they carry much more of like an overall theme, and are very, very different. And I think they're very different. I think especially just with Denis' filmography, they're very different than, I think, like the blockbuster regular like Hollywood movie. And I think even with his, like, again, even with what you could consider Denis like blockbuster movies like Blade Runner and Dune, even in those movies, he certainly doesn't lose that like appreciation for overall theme and visual imagery. However, I do think Enemy is by far the one that has it the most. If not, the whole movie is really visual imagery.
Absolutely. A true art film, and he regarded this film as his practice film, getting into English language films, and it's a great practice, truly using all the techniques.
Yes, and he had mentioned, I'd heard some quote from him recently saying that if he could make movies without dialogue, he would. I do think Denis is he's just a lover of visual imagery and visual storytelling rather than through dialogue or through, plot points or anything like that. I really think he's very visual, and that really, really reflects, as you watch Denis' filmography, you have Enemy, and that's just pure visual imagery. But even in a movie as streamlined as Prisoners, for example, or even Blade Runner, it carries such wonderful overall theme and visual imagery. And like you mentioned earlier, it uses the composition of lighting and really brings out the best in the characters and in the world building, which I think is so important with these big worlds. But I think it's wonderful to see Denis' range, to see how he can handle something as small as Enemy, where it's essentially just him and Jake Gyllenhaal and a couple of other people in some scenes, and he can really take this and take it like a step by step, and then go Prisoners, and that's a little bit bigger scale, more locations, bigger sets and like rain machines and the whole thing, and then he brings it to this other bigger step of like a already established franchise with Blade Runner. And when Blade Runner 2049 was announced, everybody who was a Blade Runner fan was like, why? There's no reason. And now Blade Runner 2049 is like a favorite amongst Blade Runner fans. So I think it's wonderful just to see how a filmmaker is able to tackle film and storytelling at every stage, no matter the budget or the amount of cast or anything like that,
It's tough to finish talking about Enemy this fast because there's so many more things to get into, and I have so many questions. But yeah, let's talk about Prisoners because,
yeah, please.
Gosh, that's a great film. I'll read the IMDb plot summary for this one too. When Keller Dover's daughter and her friend go missing, he takes matters into his own hands as the police pursue multiple leads and pressure the mounts. Now that's a good description of the film.
It's interesting. It focuses on Keller, on Dover, which he's certainly a protagonist of the film. I think Prisoners is honestly such a wonderful movie because, like we mentioned earlier, it just tackles the emotional resonance of what filmmaking is supposed to do. It's such an intense movie. I think the movie has every emotion. I think there's its moments of dark humor. There's, of course, its incredibly sad moments. It's violent, you got to look away from the screen moments. It's got wonderfully written dialogue, very heartfelt scenes. It's got very intense, suspenseful scenes, like the interrogation scenes. I think Prisoners is really, really kind of tackles filmmaking and storytelling and writing in such a really, really perfect way, in my opinion. That IMDb is interesting because I do think that the movie is less about Keller trying to find his daughters and more about, I think, the overall feeling that this entire this event of these two girls going missing and then trying to unravel how they went missing, how it impacts every single character around it. Because the narrative ends up being this very, very interesting kind of idea of these kind of, these members of kind of this cult that are waging this war on God so that, they're kidnapping and killing children so that people lose their faith. And that's very, very much, I think, the plot of the movie. It ends up being that, these people are kidnapping children and doing these things so that, they're crazy. They're essentially just cult members.
Yes.
And that ends up being, obviously the narrative of the movie. But what I really, really think the movie is about is just how that event impacts all of these characters around it. Of course, Hugh Jackman being the father. The movie opens up with him and his son hunting a deer. And it's very clear that he's a very prepared man. They show you his basement and he's one of these bunker prepared people, for apocalypse kind of prepared. He's got all of the food and all of the stock in his basement and he's very prepared for all of these things. But it's interesting because a man can be prepared for anything, a hurricane, an apocalypse, but you can never really be prepared for your own children going missing.
Yeah.
So with Keller's character, that strikes such a chord emotionally with already having what is supposed to be such a strong man and somebody who takes care of his family, being emotionally distraught in every way, not being able to know where his daughter is, and now doing everything in his power, even going as far as being violent to find out what happened to his daughter. And I think that it's a very, very emotional scene where Keller, Hugh Jackman's character, goes to the room where his wife is crying and not having, she's very, very emotional. And she kind of pushes him away and says, you were going to protect us. You told us you were always going to protect us from anything. And I think that that's such an emotional thing because he knows, the character of Keller knows that. He knows I've been preparing for all of this. But what the fuck do I do now? My daughter's missing. What do I do? You can't prepare for that.
No.
So with that in mind, it also then goes on to, of course, the mother, and then the other family is equally as affected. And you have Detective Loki, of course, with Jake Gyllenhaal, and his him being affected with this entire case. He's already a very detective with a lot of tenacity and a lot of background, but he goes into this case and it overtakes him. It overwhelms him. It becomes everything he thinks about. How it affects the town around them, how it affects the whole energy and lifestyle, I think, of this town that could be very real is impacted by this event. I think that's really what the movie's about.
Do you think that, in the poster, it's a picture of Hugh Jackman and then below him is Jake Gyllenhaal, both very front and facing in the poster. And you mentioned Keller is the protagonist, which he is, but I have a hard time considering Detective Loki as a supporting character along with Terrence Howard and Viola Davis and everyone else. Do you think that they are co-leads, or how do you see that?
Yes, no, I think that they're co-leads. I don't think that Jake Gyllenhaal is a supporting actor to this, because I think the movie develops in a way where you're seeing Hugh Jackman's response as a father and as somebody who's kind of lost it all and has no choice. You're seeing his response in, of course, kidnapping Alex, Paul Dano's character, and bringing him to this abandoned apartment home and beating him senseless, and then getting his friend involved, getting Terrence Howard involved in the whole thing. And I think that obviously that is such a huge chunk of the movie, and carries, a lot of the overall theme of what I was talking about, which is just the impact that this has on everybody. But on the other side of that is, of course, the movie has to show us what happened, has to tell us what is happening, what is occurring. And I think on the other half of that, that's when Detective Loki, Jake Gyllenhaal's character, comes in to unravel things with the audience. He is unraveling things as we are unraveling things with him. And I think that that's equally as important, because without Hugh Jackman's chunk in this story, it would just be, a detective trying to find out some missing kids, and vice versa. Without Detective Loki's part in this story, the story would really just be about Hugh Jackman, taking the justice into his own hands. And I think that neither of those individual storylines are what the movie is about. I think it plays off each other, and I think the characters play off each other very well. For example, like, it's thanks to Hugh Jackman that Detective Loki is able to kind of get to the conclusion that he gets to.
Mm-hmm.
And it's because of Detective Loki that Hugh Jackman takes the steps he takes to get to then where he is at the end of the movie. So I do think that the characters very, very much play off each other. And of course, one of the best scenes in the movie is when, Jake Gyllenhaal is suspicious of Keller doing something. And of course, at that point in the movie, Detective Loki doesn't know. He could think that Keller is the one who kidnapped the kids. So, he's suspicious. He's kind of looking at Keller, and then Keller sees him, and he goes to get a bottle of liquor and gets in the car, and they start having like this shouting match at each other. Because, of course, Detective Loki's doing his job and wants to make sure that everything is going correctly. But on the other hand, Keller, is pissed because no amount of police force and no amount of government help or whatever, or search parties are going to take away like the fear of this little girl that her father is not there to help her. And I think, again, the movie needs that kind of play off each other. I don't think that the movie would work if we cut either one of those storylines out.
That's a really great point. And if we were to cut one storyline out, like let's say we just focus on Detective Loki's side of the story, we've seen that film. And that's
Exactly.
what makes this film so unique, and that's why it's regarded as one of the best crime thrillers of our time in recent years.
Exactly. No, I agree. And on the other hand, if we were just seeing Hugh Jackman's part, you would just be seeing like a movie of some guy taking the law into his hands, which has existed before as well.
Yeah. Dirty Harry.
Exactly. Which I think is, again, like why I think that the IMDb description might be a little bit oversimplifying it, just because I think that the movie is really less about Keller and his decisions and more about the impact that this, of course, this overall theme of, religious cult and kidnapping and trafficking and all this kind of stuff, this kind of overall theme of that is carried into the rest of it, which I think is absolutely just masterful. And again, everybody in this movie, from the cinematography with Roger Deakins to the directing with Denis, acting, everybody is absolutely incredible. It really, really is a great, great movie to watch.
It's a great movie to watch, but it's a tough movie to watch. And as you said in the beginning, you can't watch it while you're having a good day. It's a film that really kind of destroys your mind, and you can't really watch anything else for the rest of the day.
It is a very, very emotionally heavy movie. I do think that it's a movie to kind of, you got to be in the mood for it. It's very, very, very intense. I think that there's some scenes in the movie that, especially like the scene with when Detective Loki tracks down, I believe his name is Bob Taylor.
Yeah, that guy who's on loan from Nolan.
Yes, yeah, he's in everything. But he's awesome. I love him. I always forget his name.
David, and I don't know how to pronounce his last name.
He was on Late Night with the Devil, correct?
Yes,
I like
yes.
That. Yes. So, anyways, this in terms of like the scene where Detective Loki tracks Bob Taylor down, and just masterful scene because it kind of starts very, very innocent. Detective Loki just kind of goes up, knocks on the door, and they're having this very kind of tense conversation about Bob Taylor buying children's clothes. And it kind of then does this incredible ramp of intensity where, Jake Gyllenhaal is now in the house and beating him up and throwing him against the ground. And then you have the, ramp and suspense of like, at least the first time I watched Prisoners. And even now I'm like, it still kind of lingers on my mind is when Detective Loki enters the house and he sees all these weird mazes drawn all over the walls and he breaks the lock on the door and he opens the door and he sees all those like plastic boxes on the floor. My first thought is that the kids are in those plastic boxes.
I know. I had the same thought too.
Yeah, right. Because the movie's just so intense and the suspense is building. And like the movie, at that point, the movie's been going on, I believe, for like an hour and a half as well. So you've been building this entire like suspense and this emotional like resonance with the characters and with what's happening. And then all of a sudden, like, again, you have Detective Loki going in there. He breaks open the boxes. And then it turns out that like the clothes from the family, like the little girls, are in there. They try to interrogate Bob Taylor, and Bob Taylor like blows his head off. It's very, very intense, and I think the movie never really shies away from keeping you in that intensity. And like you mentioned, that scene at the end, with Holly pulling out the gun and pointing it at Keller and drugging him and all that, or like shooting him, and then drugging the little girl, is just so suspenseful. You have the suspense of her putting him in the hole and the suspense of like when Detective Loki pulls up to the house. That entire climax scene is incredible. And not to mention, I believe we'd be doing a bit of a disservice if we didn't at least mention Holly's actress at least one time.
Melissa Leo, yes.
Yes, she was absolutely incredible.
She's terrifying.
Yes, which good for her.
Absolutely terrifying. Did you see that coming?
The first time I watched it, I certainly did not. I think that's the thing with the movie is you're really, really, again, I think the part of like the Detective Loki storyline is really, really intriguing because it's showing you little pieces at a time. And because you never really, really get to put it together until that very last scene where Holly is literally kind of exposition dumping to Hugh Jackman, when she's pointing the gun at him, and she's telling him all these things about all the children they did, and she literally says they would have been more if my husband hadn't died or whatever.
That is a sick comment, by the way.
Yes, I agree. But it's such a well-made and kind of intriguing movie the whole way that, at least the first time I watched it, I'm thinking the whole time that like at some point Alex is gonna end up being responsible, and then Bob Taylor gets thrown into the whole mess. And of course, upon second watch, it kind of makes a little bit more sense when they find that burned body at the bottom of the church, like in the basement, and that turns out to, of course, be Holly's husband. So it's a very, very intense movie, but I love the way that it kind of takes you through the journey of the intensity. It always keeps you in this like very, very tense line, but it never. And it sometimes even lets go a little bit of the intensity to kind of give you a feeling of at least a little bit of sense of comfort. But it almost immediately takes that away from you, which I just like when, it's a bunch of little pictures put together at 24 frames a second is what movies are. And I just like that that's what we're able to do and what Denis was able to do with the movie. And Denis, and along with all of the other collaborative masters in this movie, Roger Deakins, the cinematography is absolutely incredible, especially in Prisoners, with the cinematography being so simple. And I think that's what Roger Deakins is such a master at, cinematography, because he's able to kind of make the cinematography not distracting. I feel like a lot of movies nowadays try to make the cinematography very dynamic and almost like it's over the top for no reason. Whereas I think that Roger Deakins cinematography is so fundamentally perfect that it never takes away. You always feel like the story you're watching it's composed perfectly. Like what you're seeing is perfectly in that frame. And I think that's wonderful, especially with the freedom of the acting that I'm sure that they had, with a lot of scenes being kind of improvised or a little bit more freedom given to the actor. Like in the scene with Hugh Jackman, torturing Paul Dano, and he like breaks the sink with the hammer, that was improvised.
Oh, I did not know that.
Yeah. So when he's like kind of, he's like, "Where's my daughter?" and he's like smashing the hammer against the sink and breaks the sink. That was not supposed to happen, but obviously the freedom was given to the actors in that moment to do what they needed to do. And apparently they had gotten a few takes before, so it wasn't the first take. But regardless, it's interesting that, I like when the improv take makes it into the film because it feels very genuine.
Yeah. I'm happy you did mention that hammer scene because, that scene goes around online every so often. I just assumed that was towards the end of the film, and Paul Dano, I had this whole idea of the film. So when it came up about 30 minutes in, I was really thrown off. A lot of people are really taken by that scene. It's a tough scene, and he doesn't actually hit him with the hammer, I don't think.
No.
But I wonder if he would. I don't know.
I mean, knowing like what I know now, I think watching the scene is interesting because he, at the very last time, he smashes the sink and breaks it, and he says, "Where's my daughter?" And the very last thing he does is he hits the hammer against the wall, like next to Paul Dano's head, and the hammer, of course, just kind of gets stuck on the wall. And then Paul Dano, or Alex just slides down and kind of starts crying, and Terrence Howard just stands there in disbelief. And I think that, again, there's such genuine like emotion in that because there probably was a little bit of fear in Terrence Howard in that second. There probably was a little bit of fear.
Paul Dano, definitely.
Yeah, so him sliding down and I just think that that's kind of when you get to see these masterful scenes and these masterful actors really, really play off each other, like scenes like that. Even if it is some improvised thing that wasn't in the script, it becomes even better because the chemistry's there. All the actors know what they're doing, even if they get scared. They understand what they're there to do. And I think Paul Dano, again. My girlfriend Sophia, she's a very, very big fan of Paul Dano, and I actually, when I met her, I told her to watch this movie because she was such a Paul Dano fan, and she loves this movie. And Paul Dano is absolutely, absolutely incredible. I think he's a little bit of an underrated actor.
Absolutely, I was just gonna say, he went toe to toe with Daniel Day-Lewis in There Will Be Blood, and this is one of his great performances. And I don't know how he's underrated. I mean, even when he was younger, Little Miss Sunshine.
Yeah.
Truly talented.
I think maybe he just kind of gets a bad rap for the characters and stuff like that, but I like him. I think he's a good character actor.
So it sounds like from what you're saying that when you rewatch the film, it gets even better and you understand it even further. So I know for me, I'm going to definitely gain a lot more from a rewatch. But just thinking back to the film, when Hugh Jackman's character Keller approaches Alex, knowing what we know now, that shot of Alex when he turns to see Keller pointing a gun at him, there's so much about this film that's heartbreaking, truly, deeply heartbreaking, terrifying, shocking. But when you have an idea of his character, an idea of a character who you think is this, but he's completely not, and when you go back and you learn, the last thing we learn of Alex is through a headline that he's reunited with his family after 26 years.
Yeah, he was Barry. He was the kid.
Yeah. He was Barry, and that expression on his face, it breaks my heart. It's such a subtle reaction, but just thinking about it yesterday just nearly moved me to tears. But so the interrogation scene between Alex and Loki was really remarkable because there's so much intensity and their expressions on both of their faces. Loki is not using force, but he's intimidating. He is very intimidating. And I think the camera mostly stays on just them the whole time. There's no real cuts in that. You just kind of watch them. And again, that's a short scene. And then you had mentioned, which I'm happy you mentioned, the scene between Taylor and Loki. Because even Jake's smile in that, like nodding, it's just so dark underneath. And it's an incredible portrayal. And it's just a testament to how great of an actor he is. Just through that smile and slowly nodding, listening to him, it looks convincing that he's genuine, but oh man, is he not?
Yeah, and I think you in particular that scene when he goes to knock on the door.
Yes, that one.
Yes, he goes to knock on the door, and then when he asks about you've been shopping at the mall, and he's like, I can't afford expensive suits, and he does that laugh, that little chuckle, and he's like, but you bought children's clothes, and then his face just immediately like shifts to super serious in that instant. And I love just that intensity and in the acting. And I agree in the scene with Paul Dano and Jake Gyllenhaal in the interrogation. I love because, again, the cinematography and just the visual storytelling is so great because it opens on a wide in an interrogation room. And unlike every single other scene that opens on a wide in an interrogation room, the people aren't sitting at the table. Like Paul Dano is standing, like cowering in a corner, and then Jake Gyllenhaal is like right up against his face. And I love that that's the opening shot because it immediately sets up like what the scene is. And we don't need to get to a point, like we can assume that he probably started sitting down and then Alex got scared and stood up, or Alex never sat down because he was too scared, you know? And I love that building of the scene because we don't need to know, but building it in our head and the way that it's shot makes it interesting because how did they get to that point? How did they get to the point where Alex was cowering in a corner with Detective Loki in his face with some pictures? And I love that. I think that type of storytelling and those minute things for me are really what Denis is absolutely masterful at.
Truly a master of technique and show don't tell. That is a golden rule in cinema. And with the ending and how you describe that scene and just imagining how that scene started, how that interrogation started, that's really brilliant. That's a great thing to wonder about. And the way that scene is intercut with shots of the tree being analyzed, I guess, by forensics, with the tree through the car. And you were talking about Roger Deakins earlier and how cinematography, you can really do it incorrectly. And only true masters can really portray simple shots perfectly. And I think Denis' favorite shot of the film is when the film is divided between, a happier life, happier family, enjoying Thanksgiving, and then where are the girls, is that slow zoom on that tree, which...
Oh, yeah.
That's a great shot.
Yeah, I agree. And again, with their collaboration, you know, Denis Villeneuve and Roger Deakins, which again, that could be a whole episode in of its own as well. With Prisoners and Blade Runner is again, there's this Denis, I think, it just gives Roger Deakins so much to work with, I think, visually and with the theme of the storytelling, that I think Roger Deakins' job is probably made easier just in terms of being able to kind of get the composition and the visual storytelling that he wants. I bet that collaboration has got to be just like a clash, not a clash in a bad way, but in a good way, just a clash of titans of having like Denis and Roger Deakins, like having two minds at work on how to, you know, portray this story. And I think that it's absolutely incredible.
Absolutely. And we were talking about the kind of a backstory to Detective Loki in the beginning, but he clearly has some past trauma. As you said before, he has no family. There's a line when he's visiting father that he went through boys' homes. I watched this video called Prisoners, Symbolism Done Right by Storytellers on YouTube, and he described Loki as the only character who has elevated his consciousness above the maze, which many of the characters, important, significant characters in this film, including Keller, have a maze in their mind they have to work through. And Loki is the only one who has elevated his consciousness above that, and he's been able to put that at rest, put that away. And it's really remarkable. He's done the work on himself, and he's devoted to his work. And at a moment's notice, he's there on the job, focused. You know, he went from sitting alone in a Chinese restaurant on Thanksgiving to going right after the van that Alex is driving. And he's incredibly, I may have just said focused, but he's also just so thorough. And it just seems to all come naturally to him. He's pretty young, yet he's solved every case he's been assigned, leading me to kind of regard him as some sort of prodigy in the field. How do you see Loki? How would you describe him?
I agree with you like wholeheartedly. I think that Loki is he's a very hardened character, and I think
that's a great word.
Loki is clearly flawed, but I think that the complexity of the character, and especially with Jake Gyllenhaal acting, he really, really gets the complexity of Loki to be somebody who's flawed, but like you mentioned, not weak or vulnerable. Like he doesn't let those flaws affect him negatively. And I think that, like I mentioned earlier, there's even moments of humor in here. Like, for example, I love the interactions between Loki and his captain, because the captain of the police station seems to be, I guess, just like a tired captain who just wants to like shut up and get the job done. And he's constantly kind of like butting heads with Detective Loki. And I love the way that Detective Loki like asserts himself. Like, I think there's a scene in the movie where Detective Loki asks the captain for one more day of custody so that, Keller could be relaxed and the family could be like, okay, knowing that Alex was going to be in custody at least one more day. And the captain, is very like, no, fuck that. We're not doing that. And then, of course, when Keller finds out that Alex gets out and he goes over to the police station and he attacks him. And then, of course, Jake Gyllenhaal busts into the captain's office and he says, I fucking told you one more day. Like, when I ask you for something, you need to listen to me. And I love that, he's clearly talking to his superior officer, but he doesn't care that the authority is the authority. He if you're getting in the way, I'm going to tell you.
Right.
And I think moments like that, at least the way that it's portrayed, at least for me, it's a little bit humorous because with everything going on, you just have Detective Loki just laying into his incompetent captain. In regards to how he is as a character, and I really, really think that everything you mentioned about him being just so thorough and so organized and so for his job and having his head straight and kind of having, like you mentioned, his consciousness above this mess and this whole maze is why I do believe that the last shot of the movie is just, it's a perfect frame.
Yes.
Because, again, you just have Jake Gyllenhaal standing there and he's, quote unquote case closed in a way. And then, he still has that little bit of a lingering thought and he hears this whistle. And I love that, the whistle's so faint, it's so far away that he literally like nods to himself. No, he's like, no, I couldn't possibly be hearing this. And then he hears it again. And at that moment, I love it because that's the moment where it's like, I'm not just imagining it. And then when, you have that visual and that like stern face of Detective Loki when he's just like gets, it's almost like a off frame. He gets the target, his eyes like lock on. It's almost like he hears the whistle and his eyes aren't just floating around looking. They like lock onto a target. And it's a perfect closing shot because it doesn't need to tell you anything more. Through the development of Detective Loki's character through this entire movie that Detective Loki isn't going to stop there. He's not just going to go home after the movie cuts, which I love. I love that.
Yeah, he's going to find him. And I just keep thinking about how we were so close to having an Inception ending, because imagine if we just heard that one faint whistle and he isn't sure if he heard it and the film cuts in the end. I'm so happy The whistle was heard again and cemented, and we know he will find him. But what is Keller going to go through after that? Is he going to go to jail for a long time? More than
likely.
Yeah. Oh, definitely.
Yeah, no, I think he's definitely going to go to jail. But I think again that it portrays like, you could make a hard argument that the film doesn't have a happy ending.
That's true.
I mean, they find the little girls, and they take down the person responsible, and they get Alex back to his family, and so like in ways that narrative wants, it's a quote unquote a happy ending. But like you mentioned, and like we've been talking about it, at the end of the movie, you don't feel happy,
No.
It's a happy ending for all intents and purposes because everything really does get resolved, but it just wasn't a story that exudes happiness, because the truth is, and I think that that's also part of why this movie is so wonderful, is reality isn't always that. You're not just going to like find the solution to something or find the thing and then it's just going to be like a wonderful rosy rainbow world that you're living in now. It's still going to be like the reality of life.
That's why I feel like there's some inspiration from 70s New Hollywood films, and as you just described, you're describing like a typical 80s American film ending. Happy, always ends with a good ending, happy ending, and 70s films aren't like that, and even the cinematography is reminiscent of Gordon Willis at times, and the film ends the way it should. And it unlocks a whole other story through that whistle, and that's completely up to interpretation.
Yes, and I love that the way you said that it unlocks a whole new story, because it really does, and that's why I love movies like that really do that just interpretation aspect, because it unlocks, like you just said, it unlocks like backstory, it unlocks what happened before this scene, what happened after this scene, and the world of Prisoners, as compact as it may be, because it's not some grand thing, it's very compact in the town that's happening in. It still feels so impactful, and again, I think it does such a wonderful job of intriguing you with, every part of the film is equally as important to the narrative and to Denis, where it's not just, it's not finding out who the kidnapper is that's the most important. And it's also not finding out, like, if the little girls are alive, that's the most important. Like, the movie never really has, like, one specific point that it's trying to, like, make. It's really just trying to show you the impact of all of these events, and kind of like a domino effect almost of, the little girls going missing and then everything kind of falling apart around them as the days go on.
Yeah. I mean, it doesn't help that how different we see the little girls at the end. They were happy, running around together, truly kids, and now they were completely silent and downcast. So they're rescued, which is amazing, and that's a beautiful thing when Loki is driving recklessly to save her and bring her to the hospital, and he did it. He did save her, but the impact on that, how it's going to affect everyone after that, and especially with Keller's fate up in the air of having jail time and such, is it's a mix. It's a very complex ending, much like the whole film.
No, I totally agree, and I think that goes to say even more just how wonderful, how wonderfully made of a movie it is, that it never forgets any of its elements. Yeah. Even the little girls, which we literally don't see for most of the movie, have an impact at the very end when we see them and we see what it did to them, and we see these girls were like drugged and essentially like thrown into this world of violence and like fear and forever being like afraid, and it was like Thanksgiving, are they always going to be afraid of Thanksgiving now? Like, that's why I think it's such an intense movie, but it's intense and it's also very real. I think it never, none of the elements in the movie I think are unrealistic in the way that it's presented. Like, I think all of these things are very much things that like could happen in real life.
And that's part of why it's such a tough film to watch and scary film to watch.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. And with everything with like Bob Taylor's character, I always find super interesting too, because they even managed to throw in the element of like somebody who was impacted by the kidnappings and who is now like some sort of copycat, or who has been traumatized so far that he like feels like he needs to be a part of it, with Bob Taylor's character. And to throw that complexity into what is already a complex movie, but still have it attached to the overall narrative is, I think, very, very impressive, because Bob Taylor's character is crucial to the movie, but it's also, when you think about who he is to the overall, he's really just a copycat.
Yeah, he is a copycat, and that was part of the things that confused me, actually, was during the first watch and had to be explained through research how he fits into the film, and if he was a red herring, but he wasn't. He was very much a crucial part, as you said, to the film.
Yes.
Do you think Denis and Jake will work together again?
I hope so. I don't see why they wouldn't. I'm not entirely aware of Denis' upcoming filmography besides doing Messiah. So, I hope to be able to see Jake Gyllenhaal. I really do hope to be able to see Jake Gyllenhaal and Denis Villeneuve work together again, but I don't know.
I really hope so. It's been a little over 10 years, but it sounds like they really enjoyed working together, and they bring out, even Denis has said Jake makes him a better director, so hopefully they will continue to work together, and a long overdue collaboration is in the works.
Yes, and I like I hope that whenever it does come that it's of this quality with the writing and everything. And I think that that's honestly probably one of the main reasons, besides scheduling and stuff, is these professionals seem to kind of pick and choose the project that they kind of want to work on together and collaborate. So with them, collaborating on Enemy and then collaborating on Prisoners, even though they're vastly different movies and vastly different characters that Jake Gyllenhaal is playing, I do think that there's very much like almost like they collaborate in a very specific way, if that makes sense.
Yeah, I definitely see that, and hopefully it's not off the table entirely.
No, I think the same. I would love to see another Denis Jake Gyllenhaal film, even if he manages to just be one of the 20 actors in it.
Right. We covered a lot, but man, there's so much that we could go through. But thank you so much for joining me, Manny. I'm so happy we met on Time Will Tell last November. You were so kind and one of the first people on the crew I befriended. So I'm very grateful, and it's always a pleasure to talk film with you. You're an incredible film analyzer, and I hope to work with you again in the future. And you actually is it your directorial debut that is coming out next month? Well, in September?
Yep.
That's very exciting. Autopsy. Congratulations.
Yeah. Thank you. So, yep, I directed my first short film for Orlando Independent Filmmakers. Like, they have their Orlando Independent Filmmakers Challenge. So I submitted my film for that, called The Autopsy. And once the OIF premiere happens, which I believe is in September, then I think we'll kind of be uploading it to all the good places and doing a little bit more of a press kit and submitting it to some more festivals.
I can't wait to see it. What is Autopsy about?
So the Orlando Independent Filmmakers does like a challenge where they release like 3 categories or genres per se. So this year's was comedy, horror, and musical. So I submitted a script for horror, and so the Autopsy is about a pathologist, so a woman named Drew Cooper, who's doing an autopsy. And as she's doing the autopsy and like digging around the corpse and stuff, she pulls out the bracelet of her missing daughter. And so it's intercut between the autopsy and then the therapist scene where it's unraveling that, her daughter went missing. And the autopsy that we're seeing is a nightmare that she's been having where she's been having this kind of like reliving the guilt and the grief that she's been going through because of her daughter going missing. And that is represented and kind of characterized with like a scary corpse.
Oh, geez. Like a true horror film then.
Yeah, so it's a horror. It's a little bit, it certainly takes a little bit more of like an emotional kind of tone, not so much jump scary or anything like that. And yeah, I'm very, very proud of it. A lot of very, very hardworking people worked on it, from the cinematographers to the editors. My producer, Angel Avalos, which you also met on Time Will Tell.
Yes, we did, yes.
Yep, so he was producer. He was absolutely incredible. And, the cinematographer was incredible. Everybody was there, was absolutely incredible, and everybody was there. It was wonderful to have them, wonderful to have the experience. I'm very proud of what we were able to do with the autopsy. We still have a little bit of work to do in terms of the color grading and some of the sound design, but it has been submitted for Orlando Independent Filmmakers for their deadline. And once we get those changes up, we'll be submitting it to other festivals and making it kind of a little bit more public for people to watch.
That's exciting. That's really incredible.
Yeah.
Was it always your goal or dream to be a director?
I wouldn't say always. I think it's certainly been one of those things like I've kind of fluctuated, but I have always, ever since I was a little kid, loved movies. And I think for me and my family, movies were always kind of like that time we were able to kind of forget about life and problems and just kind of watch a good movie together. And so I've always been super drawn to movies. I've always been super drawn to storytelling, and I love the visual medium of like filmmaking. So I've kind of fluctuated a lot, but as I was going through college, I then kind of changed my mind and went to film production technology. And I honestly love it. I think it's wonderful. It's a wonderful industry to work in. It's very hard, it's very competitive, but I think that's part of the charm. It's, at least I would prefer it over like a regular 9 to 5. But
definitely.
as kind of what I'm growing as my kind of my career as a first AC. But in terms of me wanting to be a director is a dream that I think I've had for pretty recent. And I don't my kind of range with that is I certainly don't want to reach like any levels of fame or anything like that. I think I would just like the opportunity to do it for a living. Like if I can make good movies and get paid enough to live off of them, then I'll be happy. I don't need to be famous or anything, but I would love to just make good stuff that people like.
Wow, that's really admirable. How did you feel to step into the director role? Did you feel like you were ready, or were you very nervous?
Oh, it was very, very incredible. It was a very wonderful learning experience because I think directing for the most part is at least for a lot of general audiences, I think it's seen as like a very production on the day kind of job, and I think a lot of directing is really a pre-production job.
Oh, yeah.
So really, we worked almost 2 to 3 months on the pre-production in terms of like logistics and all of that. But in terms of my directing part, I had to, of course, do script writing, script breakdowns, and try to storyboard, getting to like that chain of communication with the department heads, getting to explain to the production designer how I want the sets to look and how I want the costumes to look, and getting all of the color palettes together, for the lighting, and the production designer and the cinematographer have to be on the same page. And so all of those things and kind of figuring it out and all of the pre-production is very, very important. It was like a learning experience for me to kind of see how all of that is handled at a legitimate level, not just conceptually.
Right.
And I loved directing on set. I think by far my favorite part of directing is working with actors. I loved working with my actress, Laura Cooper. She was the main actress. She was absolutely incredible. We also had a child actor. Her name's Alice Dehane, and she was a star. And I loved working with actors. I love being able to kind of emotionally work with them. I think actors in general tend to be very creative and also emotional people. And I think I'm an emotional person. I like to kind of dig for that emotion and see how we're able to portray that emotion in a realistic way for an audience. The whole point of art is to kind of be able to portray an emotion. So I think that my favorite part was definitely getting to work with actors, and the whole experience has been wonderful. I think one of the most eye-opening experiences for me definitely has been just post-production, seeing how all of it comes together in post, and having a clear vision for how everything kind of heads and will come together in the end. I think is very, very important, and not as easy as it may sound.
No, post-production is tough work, along with even pre-production, production, everything is, but post-production, editing, haha.
Yeah, it's been a wonderful experience regardless.
Do you already have your next project in the works?
No. I literally I submitted the film for OIF, and we had been working kind of on a crunch due to deadlines and schedules. So I just submitted actually the autopsy for OIF on Monday, and today's Wednesday, so like 2 days ago.
Wow.
Yeah. So I'm taking a little bit of a break until the premiere, but after that we'll be hopping back into doing like the press kit and kind of doing a little bit of the tweaks for some of the festival runs for the actual submissions. And as of right now, there is nothing in the works. However, Angel and I are kind of, in the talks of seeing if we want to collaborate again, because him and I work together very well.
Yeah, you two really did on Time Will Tell. This could be a great pair in the future. I can see it.
I hope so. I think we're working towards something very, very cool, and I think the work ethic is there, and the drive is there.
Yeah. And from how you describe film and your appreciation of it and knowing what it takes to work on a film and working with actors, it sounds like it will be a guaranteed great film. And I have a hard time with horror, but I might have to make an exception and watch your film.
Well, I'll appreciate that certainly. And I don't think it's like jump scary horror or anything like that. I think it's very, very emotional. But I'd love for you to watch it when it comes out.
I'm excited for it, and then the fact that you say no jump scares that helps. That really helps.
Yeah,
So everyone stay tuned for Autopsy. It's going to go through the festivals, and it will be online at some point soon. I'll make sure to post about it. Is there a film recommendation, a line from a film, really anything you'd like to conclude our episode with today?
Oh, that's a good one. Well, first, I wanted to say, honestly, thank you so much for having me. This was a pleasure. And
Of course.
I love talking film in general. And I hope that our conversation here is like a nice listen for your listeners.
I think so. You're great at film analysis, so.
Well, thank you. And I hope you'll bring me back on a later episode. But
Yes.
I would say film recommendation, honestly, my favorite movie of all time, and it is constantly number one on the list, even though my list is constantly changing. My favorite movie of all time is Kill Bill Volume 1. So if anybody out there hasn't seen Kill Bill Volume 1, I recommend it. It's a fun time. It's just super fun action and awesome sound effects and very cool music and just a very, very awesome experience. I think Kill Bill is a very fun time. And yeah, I just love the world building in that movie. I love the weird editing that is very energetic, and the world building is also very cool. The character building is awesome. I love Lucy Liu as Oren Ishii. So film recommendation. If you haven't seen Kill Bill, watch it.
It's a great film. Tarantino, another phenomenal director.
Yeah.
To end this episode, I'll recommend Changeling because I think it's an underrated film with a similar subject matter to Prisoners. Clint Eastwood directed it.
Angelina Jolie?
Yes, Angelina.
Oh.
She's one of my very favorites. You've seen it?
Yes, I have. That movie is very, very, very good.
Yes.
I do agree, very underrated. It
Yes.
is a very intense movie as well.
Very, very intense and very similar subject matter, but that's based on a true story set in the 1920s. And gosh, I'm so happy you've seen it. Not many people I know have seen it.
No, that movie is absolutely incredible. I think, and very much, at least in what I think most people know Angelina Jolie for, very different character than what
Yes.
she normally is known for.
I think it's her best film. Her best role, I'd say, is Lisa in Girl Interrupted, but this, I think, is her best film.
Yes, this is a very, very good film. I will second that recommendation as well.
Yes, I love it. Thank you again for joining me today, Manny, and thank you all for listening. And Manny, I think this is the beginning of a beautiful episode.
Oh, awesome. Thank you so much, Elizabeth. It was a pleasure.
Bye, everyone. Special thanks to Manny Plaza Fernandez, Sammy Al-Kamel, and Dr. Jillian Smith. This episode was recorded on August 7th, 2024.